The Riddle. There was once a king's son who was seized with a great desire to travel about the world, and took no one with him but a faithful servant. One day he came to a great forest, and when darkness overtook him he could find no shelter, and knew not where to pass the night. Then he saw a girl who was going towards a small house, and when he came nearer he saw that the maiden was young and beautiful. He spoke to her and said, "Dear child, can I and my servant find shelter for the night in the little house?" "Oh yes," said the girl in a sad voice, "you certainly can, but I do not advise you to venture to it. Do not go in." "Why not?" asked the king's son. The maiden sighed and said, "My stepmother practices wicked arts. She is ill-disposed toward strangers." Then he saw very well that he had came to a house of a witch, but it was dark, and he could not go farther, and also was not afraid. He entered. The old woman was sitting in an armchair by the fire, and looked at the stranger with her red eyes. "Good evening," growled she, and pretended to be quite friendly. "Take a seat, and rest yourselves." She fanned the fire on which she was cooking something in a small pot. The daughter warned the two to be prudent, to eat nothing and drink nothing, for the old woman brewed evil drinks. They slept quietly until early morning, when they were making ready for their departure, and the king's son was already seated on his horse. The old woman said, "Stop a moment. I will first hand you a parting draught." While as she fetched it, the king's son rode away, and the servant, who had to buckle his saddle tight, was the only one present when the wicked witch came with the drink. "Take that to your master," said she. But at that instant the glass broke, and the poison spurted on the horse, and it was so strong that the animal immediately fell down dead. The servant ran after his master and told him what had happened, but as he did not want to leave his saddle behind, he ran back to fetch it. When he came to the dead horse, however, a raven was already sitting on it, devouring it. "Who knows whether we shall find anything better today?" said the servant. So he killed the raven and took it with him. And now they journeyed onwards into the forest the whole day, but could not get out of it. By nightfall they found an inn and entered it. The servant gave the raven to the innkeeper to prepare for supper. They had stumbled, however, on a den of murderers, and during the darkness 12 of these came, intending to kill the strangers and rob them. But before they set about this work, they sat down to supper, and the innkeeper and the witch sat down with them, and together they ate a dish of soup in which was cut up from the flesh of the raven. Hardly had they swallowed a couple of mouthfuls before they all fell down dead, for the raven had communicated to them the poison from the horse flesh. There was no one else left in the house but the innkeeper's daughter, who was honest, and had taken no part in their godless deeds. She opened all the doors to the stranger and showed him the store of treasures. But the king's son said that she might keep everything, he would have none of it, and rode onwards with his servant. After they had traveled about for a long time, they made it to a town in which was a beautiful but proud princess, who had made it known that whoever so should set her a riddle which she could not guess, that man would be her husband. But if she guessed it, his head must be cut off. She had 3 days to guess it in, but was so clever that she always found the answer to the riddle given to her before the appointed time. 9 suitors had already perished in this manner before the king's son arrived, and blinded by her great beauty, was willing to stake his life for it. Then he went to her and laid his riddle before her. "What is this?" said he. "One slew none, and yet slew 12. She did not know what that was. She thought and thought, but she could not solve it. She opened her riddle books, but it was not in them. In short, her wisdom was at an end. As she did not know how to help herself, she ordered her maid to creep into the lord's sleeping chamber, and listen to his dreams, and thought that he would perhaps speak in his sleep, and reveal the riddle. But the clever servant had placed himself in the bed instead of his master, and when the maid came there, he tore from her the mantle in which she had wrapped herself, and chased her out with rods. The second night the king's daughter sent her maid-in-waiting, who was to see if she could succeed better in listening. But the servant took her mantle also away from her, and hunted her out with rods. Now the master believed himself safe for the 3rd night, and lay down in his own bed. Then came the princess herself, and she had put on a misty gray mantle, and she seated herself near him. And when she thought that he was asleep and dreaming, she spoke to him, and hoped that he would answer in his sleep, as many do. But he was awake, and understood and heard everything quite well. Then she asked, "One slew none. What is that?" He replied, "A raven, which ate of a dead and poisoned horse, and died of it." She inquired further, "And yet slew 12. What is that?" He answered, "That means 12 murderers, who ate the raven and died of it." When she knew the answer to the riddle, she wanted to steal away, but he held her mantle so fast that she was forced to leave it behind her. Next morning the king's daughter announced that she had guessed the riddle, and sent for the 12 judges and expounded it before them. But the youth begged for a hearing and said, "She stole into my room in the night and questioned me. Otherwise she could not have discovered it." The judges said, "Bring us proof of this." Then were the 3 mantles brought thither by the servant, and when the judges saw the misty gray one, in which the king's daughter usually wore, they said, "Let the mantle be embroidered with gold and silver, and then it will be your wedding mantle." Mother Holle. There was once a widow who had 2 daughters, one of whom was pretty and industrious, while the other was ugly and idle. But she was much fonder of the ugly and idle one, because she was her own daughter, and the other, who was a stepdaughter, was obliged to do all the work, and be the Cinderella of the house. Every day the poor girl had to sit by a well, in the highway, and spin until her fingers bled. Now it happened that one day the shuttle was marked with her blood, so she dipped it in the well to wash the mark off, but it dropped out of her hand and fell to the bottom. She began to weep, and ran to her stepmother and told her of the mishap, but she scolded her sharply, and was so merciless as to say, "Since you had let the shuttle fall in, you must fetch it out again." So the girl went back to the well, and did not know what to do, and in the sorrow of her heart she jumped into the well to get the shuttle. She lost her senses, and when she awoke and came to herself again, she was in a lovely meadow where the sun was shining, and many thousands of flowers were growing. Across this meadow she went, and at last came to a baker's oven full of bread, and the bread cried out, "Oh, take me out, or I shall burn. I have been baked a long time." So she went up to it and took out all of the loaves one after another with the bread shovel. After that she went on till she came to a tree covered with apples, which called out to her, "Oh, shake me, we apples are all ripe." So she shook the tree until the apples fell like rain, and went on shaking till they were all down, and when she had gathered them into a heap, she went on her way. At last she came to a little house, out of which an old woman peeped, but she had such large teeth that the little girl was frightened, and was about to run away. But the old woman called out to her, "What are you afraid of, dear child? Stay with me. If you will do all the work in the house properly, you shall be better for it. Only you must care to make my bed well, and shake it thoroughly till the feathers fly, for then there is snow on the earth, and I am Mother Holle." As the old woman spoke so kindly to her, the girl took courage and agreed to enter her service. She attended to everything to the satisfaction of her mistress, and always shook her bed so vigorously that the feathers flew about like snowflakes. So she had a pleasant life with her, never an angry word, and to eat she had boiled or roast meat every day. She stayed some time with Mother Holle before she became sad. At first she did not know what was the matter with her, but found at length that it was homesickness. Although she was many times better off here than at home, still she had a longing to be there. At last she said to the old woman, "I have a longing for home, and however well off I am down here, I cannot stay any longer. I must go up again to my own people." Mother Holle said, "I am pleased that you long for your home again, as you have served me so truly. I myself will take you up again." Thereupon she took her by the hand and led her to a large door. The door was opened, and just as the maiden was standing beneath the doorway, a heavy shower of golden rain fell, and all the gold clung to her, so that she was completely covered over with it. "You shall have that, because you have been so industrious," said Mother Holle, and at the same time she gave her back the shuttle which she had let fall into the well. Thereupon the door closed, and the maiden found herself up above upon the earth, not far from her mother's house. And as she went into the yard, the cock was sitting on the well and cried, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, your golden girls come back to you." So she went in to her mother, and as she arrived thus covered with gold, she was well received, both by her and her sister. The girl told all that had happened to her, and as soon as the mother heard how she had come by so much wealth, she was very anxious to obtain the same good luck for the ugly and lazy daughter. She had to seat herself by the well and spin, and in order that her shuttle might be stained with blood, she stuck her hand into a thorn bush and pricked her finger. Then she threw her shuttle into the well and jumped in after it. She came, like the other, to the beautiful meadow, and walked along the very same path. When she got to the oven, the bread again cried, "Oh, take me out, or I shall burn. I have been baked a long time." But the lazy thing answered, "As if I had any wish to make myself dirty." And on she went. Soon she came to the apple tree, which cried, shake me, we apples are all ripe." But she answered, "I like that. None of you might fall on my head," and so went on. When she came to Mother Holle's house, she was not afraid, for she had already heard of her big teeth, and she hired herself onto her immediately. The first day she forced herself to work diligently, and obeyed Mother Holle when she told her to do anything, for she was thinking of all the gold that she would give her. But on the second day she began to be lazy, and on the third day still more so, and then she would not get up in the morning at all. Neither did she make Mother Holle's bed as she ought, and did not shake it so as to make the feathers fly up. Mother Holle was soon tired of this, and gave her notice to leave. The lazy girl was willing enough to go, and thought that now the golden rain would come. Mother Holle led her also to the great door, but while she was standing beneath it, instead of gold, a big kettle full of pitch was emptied over her. "That was the reward for your service," said Mother Holle, and shut the door. So the lazy girl went home, but she was quite covered with pitch, and the cock on the well, as soon as he saw her, cried out, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, your dirty girls come back to you." But the pitch clung fast to her, and could not be got off, as long as she lived. The 7 Ravens. There was once a man who had 7 sons, and still he had no daughter, however much he wished for one. At length his wife began to give him hope of a child, and when it came into the world, it was a girl. The joy was great, but the child was sickly and small, and had to be privately baptized on account of its weakness. The father sent one of the boys in haste to the spring to fetch water for the baptism. The other 6 went with him, and as each of them wanted to be the first to fill it, the jug fell into the well. There they stood and did not know what to do, and none of them dared to go home. As they still did not return, the father grew impatient and said, "They've certainly forgotten it while playing some game, the wicked boys." He became afraid that the girl would have to die without being baptized, and in his anger cried, "I wish the boys were all turned into ravens." Hardly was the word spoken before he heard a whirling of wings over his head, looked up, and saw 7 coal-black ravens flying away. The parents could not withdraw this curse, and however sad they were at the loss of their 7 sons, they still to some extent comforted themselves with their dear little daughter, who soon grew strong and every day became more beautiful. For a long time she did not know that she had brothers, for her parents were careful not to mention them before her. But one day she accidentally heard some people saying of herself that the girl was certainly beautiful, but that in reality she was to blame for the misfortune which had befallen her 7 brothers. Then she was much troubled, and went to her father and mother and asked if it was true that she had brothers, and what had become of them. The parents now dared to keep the secret no longer, but said that what had befallen her brothers was the will of heaven, and that her birth had only been the innocent cause. But the maiden took it to heart daily, and thought she must save her brothers. She had no rest or peace until she set out secretly, and went forth into the wide world to search for her brothers and set them free, let it cost what it might. She took nothing with her but a little ring belonging to her parents as keepsake, a loaf of bread against hunger, and a little pitcher of water against thirst, and a little chair as a provision against weariness. And now she went continually onwards, far, far into the very end of the world. Then she came to the sun, but it was too hot and terrible, and devoured little children. Hastily she ran away, and ran to the moon, but it was far too cold, and also awful and malicious. And when it saw the child, it said, I smell the flesh of men." At this she ran swiftly away, and came to the stars, which were kind and good to her, and each of them sat on its own particular little chair. But the morning star arose, and gave her the drumstick of a chicken, and said, "If you have not that drumstick, you cannot open the glass mountain, and in the glass mountain are your brothers." The maiden took the drumstick, wrapped it carefully in a cloth, and went onwards again until she came to the glass mountain. The door was shut, and she thought she would take out the drumstick. But when she undid the cloth, it was empty, and she had lost the good star's present. What was she now to do? She wished to rescue her brothers, and had no key to the glass mountain. The good sister took a knife, cut off one of her little fingers, put it in the door, and succeeded in opening it. When she had gone inside, a little dwarf came to meet her, who said, "My child, what are you looking for?" "I am looking for my brothers, the 7 ravens," she replied. The dwarf said, "The Lord Ravens are not at home, but if you will wait here until they come, step in." Thereupon the little dwarf carried the ravens' dinner in, on 7 little plates and 7 little glasses, and the little sister ate a morsel from each plate, and from each little glass she took a sip. But in the last little glass she dropped the ring which she had brought away with her. Suddenly she heard a whirling of wings and a rushing through the air, and then the little dwarf said, "Now the Lord Ravens are flying home." Then they came, and wanted to eat and drink, and looked for their little plates and glasses. Then said one to the other, "Who has eaten something from my plate? Who has drunk out of my little glass?" It was a human mouth, and when the 7th came to the bottom of the glass, the ring rolled against his mouth. Then he looked at it, and saw that it was a ring belonging to his father and mother, and said, "God grant that our sister may be here, and then we shall be free." When the maiden, who was standing behind the door watching, heard that wish, she came forth, and on this all the ravens were restored to their human form again, and they embraced and kissed each other, and went joyfully home. Little Red Cap. Once upon a time there was a dear little girl who was loved by everyone who looked at her, but most of all by her grandmother, and there was nothing that she would have not given to the child. Once she gave her a little cap of red velvet, which suited her so well that she would never wear anything else, so she was always called Little Red Cap. One day her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Cap, here is a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take them to your grandmother. She is ill and weak, and they will do her good. Set out before it gets hot, and when you are going, walk nicely and quietly, and do not run off the path, or you may fall and break the bottle, and then your grandmother will get nothing. And when you go into her room, don't forget to say good morning, and don't peep into every corner before you do it." "I will take great care," said Little Red Cap to her mother, and gave her hand on it. The grandmother lived out in the wood, half a league from the village, and just as Little Red Cap entered the wood, a wolf met her. Red Cap did not know what a wicked creature he was, and was not at all afraid of him. "Good day, Little Red Cap," said he. "Thank you kindly, wolf." "Whither away so early, Little Red Cap?" "To my grandmother's." "What have you got in your apron?" "Cake and wine. Yesterday was baking day, so poor sick grandmother is to have something good, to make her stronger." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Cap?" "A good quarter of a league further in the woods. Her house stands under the 3 large oak trees. The nut trees are just below. You surely must know it," replied Little Red Cap. The wolf thought to himself, "What a tender young creature! What a nice plump mouthful! She'll be better to eat than the old woman. I must act craftily, so as to catch both." So he walked for a short time by the side of Little Red Cap, and then he said, "See, Little Red Cap, how pretty the flowers are about here. Why do you not look around? I believe, too, that you do not hear how sweetly the little birds are singing. You walk gravely along as if you are going to school, while everything else out here in the wood is merry." Little Redcap raised her eyes, and when she saw the sunbeams dancing here and there through the trees, and pretty flowers growing everywhere, she thought, "Suppose I take grandmother a fresh nosegay. That would please her too. It is so early in the day that I shall still get there in good time." And so she ran from the path into the wood to look for flowers. And whenever she had picked one, she fancied that she had still saw a prettier one further on, and ran after it, and so got deeper and deeper into the wood. Meanwhile, the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house and knocked at the door. "Who is there?" "Little Redcap," replied the wolf. "She is bringing cake and wine. Open the door." "Lift the latch," called out the grandmother. "I am too weak and cannot get up." The wolf lifted up the latch. The door sprang open, and without saying a word he went straight to the grandmother's bed and devoured her. Then he put on her clothes, dressed himself in her cap, and laid himself in bed and drew the curtains. Little Redcap, however, had been running about picking flowers, and when she had gathered so many that she could carry no more, she remembered her grandmother, and set out on the way to her. She was surprised to find that the cottage door was standing open, and when she went into the room, she had such a strange feeling that she said to herself, "Oh dear, how uneasy I feel today, and at other times I like being with grandmother so much." She called out, "Good morning," but received no answer. So she went to the bed and drew back the curtains. There lay her grandmother, with her cap pulled far over her face, and looking very strange. "Oh, grandmother," she said, "what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my child," was the reply. "But grandmother, what big eyes you have," she said. "Better to see you with, my dear." "But grandmother, what large hands you have." "Better to hug you with." "Oh, but grandmother, what a terrible big mouth you have." "The better to eat you with." And scarcely had the wolf said this, with one bound, he was out of bed and swallowed up Redcap. When the wolf had appeased his appetite, he lay down again in the bed, fell asleep, and began to snore very loud. The huntsman was just passing the house, and thought to himself, "How the old woman is snoring. I must just see if she wants anything." So he went into the room, and when he came to the bed, he saw that the wolf was lying on it. "Do I find you here, you old sinner?" said he. "I have long sought you." Then, just as he was going to fire at him, it occurred to him that the wolf might have devoured the grandmother, and that she might still be saved. So he did not fire, but took a pair of scissors, and began to cut open the stomach of the sleeping wolf. When he had made 2 snips, he saw the little Redcap shining, and then he made 2 snips more, and the little girl sprang out, crying, "Ah, how frightened I have been! How dark it was inside the wolf!" And after that the aged grandmother came out alive also, but scarcely able to breathe. Redcap, however, quickly fetched great stones with which they filled the wolf's belly, and when he awoke he wanted to run away, but the stones were so heavy that he collapsed at once, and fell dead. Then all 3 were delighted. The huntsman drew off the wolf's skin and went home with it. The grandmother ate the cake and drank the wine which Redcap had brought, and revived. But Redcap thought to herself, "As long as I live, I will never by myself leave the path to run into the wood, when my mother has forbidden me to do so." It is also related that once when Redcap was again taking cakes to the old grandmother, another wolf spoke to her, and tried to entice her from the path. Redcap, however, was on her guard, and went straight forward on her way, and told her grandmother that she had met the wolf, and that he had said good morning to her, but with such a wicked look in his eyes, that if they had not been on the public road, she was certain he would have eaten her up. "Well," said the grandmother, "we have shut the door that he may not come in." Soon afterwards the wolf knocked, and cried, "Open the door, grandmother. I am little Redcap, and I am bringing you some cakes." But they did not speak, or open the door, so the grey beard stole twice or thrice around the house, and at last jumped on the roof, intending to wait until Redcap went home in the evening, and then to steal after her and devour her in the darkness. But the grandmother saw what was in his thoughts. In front of the house was a great stone trough, so she said to the child, "Take the pail, Redcap. I made some sausages yesterday, so carry the water in which I boiled them to the trough." Redcap carried until the great trough was quite full. Then the smell of the sausages reached the wolf, and he sniffed and peeped down, and at last stretched out his neck so far that he could no longer keep his footing, and began to slip, and slipped down from the roof straight into the great trough, and was drowned. But Red Cap went joyously home, and no one ever did anything to harm her again. The Singing Bone. In a certain country there was once great lamentation over a wild boar that had laid waste to a farmer's fields, killed the cattle, and ripped up people's bodies with his tusks. The king promised a large reward to anyone who would free the land from this plague, but the beast was so big and strong that no one dared to go near the forest in which it lived. At last the king gave notice that whoever so should capture or kill the wild boar should have his only daughter to wife. Now there lived in a country 2 brothers, sons of a poor man, who declared themselves willing to undertake the hazardous enterprise. The elder, who was crafty and shrewd out of pride, the younger, who was innocent and simple from a kind heart. The king said, "In order that you may be the more sure of finding the beast, you must go into the forests from opposite sides." So the elder went in on the west side, and the younger on the east. When the younger had gone a short way, a little man stepped up to him. He held in his hands a black spear and said, "I give you this spear because your heart is pure and good. With this you can boldly attack the wild boar, and it will do you no harm." He thanked the little man, shouldered the spear, and went on fearlessly. Before long he saw the beast, which rushed at him, but he held the spear towards it, and in its blind fury it ran so swiftly against it that its heart was cloven in twain. Then he took the monster on his back, and went homewards with it to the king. As he came out of the other side of the wood, there stood at the entrance a house where people were making merry with wine and dancing. His elder brother had gone in there, and thinking that after all the boar would not run away from him, was going to drink until he felt brave. But when he saw his young brother coming out of the wood, laden with his booty, his envious, evil heart gave him no peace. He called out to him, "Come in, dear brother, rest and refresh yourself with a cup of wine." The youth, who suspected no evil, went in, and told him about the good little man who had given him the spear, wherewith he had slain the boar. The elder brother kept him there until the evening, and then they went away together, and when in the darkness they came to a bridge over a brook, the elder brother let the other go first, and when he was halfway across he gave him such a blow from behind that he fell down dead. He buried him beneath the bridge, took the boar, and carried it to the king, pretending that he had killed it, whereupon he obtained the king's daughter in marriage. And when his younger brother did not come back, he said, "The boar must have ripped up his body," and everyone believed it. But as nothing remains hidden from God, so this black deed also has come to light. Years afterwards, a shepherd was driving his herd across the bridge, and saw lying in the sand beneath a snow-white little bone. He thought that it would make a good mouthpiece, so he clambered down, picked it up, and cut out of it a mouthpiece for his horn. But when he blew through it for the first time, to his great astonishment, the bone began of its own accord to sing. "Ah, friend, thou blowest upon my bone. Long have I lain beside the water. My brother slew me for the boar, and took for his wife the king's daughter." "What a wonderful horn," said the shepherd. "It sings by itself. I must take it to my lord the king." And when he came with it to the king, the horn again began to sing its little song. The king understood it all, and caused the ground below the bridge to be dug up, and then the whole skeleton of the murdered man came to light. The wicked brother could not deny the deed, and was sewn up in a sack and drowned. But the bones of the murdered man were laid to rest in a beautiful tomb in the churchyard. The Devil with the 3 Golden Hairs. There was once a poor woman who gave birth to a little son, and as he came into the world with a caul on, it was predicted that in his 14th year he would have the king's daughter for his wife. It happened that soon afterwards the king came into the village, and no one knew that he was the king. And when he asked the people what news there was, they answered, "A child has just been born with a caul on. Whatever anyone born undertakes turns out well." It is prophesied, too, that in his 14th year he will have the king's daughter for his wife. The king, who had a bad heart and was angry about the prophecy, went to the parents, and seeming quite friendly said, "You poor people, let me have your child, and I will take care of it." At first they refused, but when the stranger offered them a large amount of gold for it, and they thought, "It is a child of good fortune, and everything must turn out well for it," they at last consented, and gave him the child. The king put it in a box and rode away with it until it came to a deep piece of water. Then he drew the box into it and thought, "I have freed my daughter from her undesired suitor." The box, however, did not sink, but floated like a boat, and not a drop of water made its way into it, and it floated to within 2 miles of the king's chief city, where there was a mill, and it came to a halt at the mill dam. A miller's boy, who by good luck was standing there, noticed it and pulled it out with a hook, thinking that he had found a great treasure. But when he opened it, it lay there a pretty boy inside, quite fresh and lively. He took him to the miller and his wife, and as they had no children they were glad, and said, "God has given him to us." They took great care of the foundling, and he grew up in all goodness. It happened that at once, in a storm, the king went into the mill, and asked the millfolk if the tall youth were their son. "No," answered they, "he is a foundling. 14 years ago he floated down the mill dam in a box, and the mill boy pulled him out of the water." Then the king knew that it was none other than the child of good fortune, which he had thrown into the water, and he said, "My good people, could not the youth take a letter to the queen? I will give him 2 gold pieces as a reward." "Just as the king commands," answered they, and they told the boy to hold himself in readiness. Then the king wrote a letter to the queen, wherein he said, "As soon as the boy arrives with this letter, let him be killed and buried, and all must be done before I come home." The boy set out with this letter, but he lost his way, and in the evening came to a large forest. In the darkness he saw a small light. He went towards it and reached a cottage. When he went in, an old woman was sitting by the fire quite alone. She started when she saw the boy, and said, "Whence do you come, and whither are you going?" "I come from the mill," he answered, "and I wish to go to the queen, to whom I am taking a letter. But as I have lost my way in the forest, I should like to stay here over a night." "You poor boy," said the woman, "you have come into a den of thieves, and when they come home they will kill you." "Let them come," said the boy, "I am not afraid, but I am so tired that I cannot go any further," and he stretched himself upon a bench and fell asleep. Soon afterwards the robbers came, and angrily asked what strange boy was lying there. "Ah," said the old woman, "it is an innocent child who has lost himself in the forest, and out of pity I have let him come in. He has to take a letter to the queen." The robbers opened the letter and read it, and in it was written that the boy, as soon as he arrived, should be put to death. Then the hard-hearted robbers felt pity, and their leader tore up the letter and wrote another, saying that as soon as the boy came, he should be married at once to the king's daughter. Then they let him lie quietly on the bench until the next morning, and when he awoke they gave him the letter, and showed him the right way. And the queen, when she had received the letter and read it, did as what was written in it, and had a splendid wedding feast prepared, and the king's daughter was married to the child of good fortune, and as the youth was handsome and friendly, she lived with him in joy and contentment. After some time the king returned to his palace and saw that the prophecy was fulfilled, the child married to his daughter. "How has that come to pass?" said he. "I gave quite another order in my letter." So the queen gave him the letter, and said that he might see for himself what was written in it. The king read the letter and saw that it had quite well been exchanged for the other. He asked the youth what had become of the letter entrusted to him, and why he had brought another instead of it. "I know nothing about it," answered he. "It must have been exchanged in the night, when I slept in the forest." The king said in a passion, "You shall not have everything quite so much your own way. Whoever so marries my daughter must fetch me from hell 3 golden hairs from the head of the devil. Bring me what I want, and you shall keep my daughter." In this way the king hoped to be rid of him forever. But the child of good fortune answered, "I will fetch the golden hairs. I am not afraid of the devil." Whereupon he took leave of them and began his journey. The road led him to a large town, where the watchman by the gates asked him what his trade was and what he knew. "I know everything," answered the child of good fortune. "Then you can do us a favor," said the watchman. "If you will tell us why our market fountain, which has once flowed with wine, has become dry, and no longer gives even water. That you shall know, answered he. Only wait until I come back. Then he went farther and came to another town, and there also the gatekeeper asked him what his trade, and what he knew. I know everything, answered he. Then you can do us a favor, and tell us why a tree in our town, which once bore golden apples, now does not even put forth leaves. You shall know that, answered he. Only wait until I come back. Then he went on and came to a wide river, over which he must cross. The ferryman asked him what his trade was and what he knew. I know everything, answered he. Then you can do me a favor, said the ferryman. Tell me why I must always be rowing backwards and forwards, and am never set free. You shall know that, answered he. Only wait until I come back. When he had crossed the water, he found the entrance to hell. It was black and sooty within, and the devil was not at home, but his grandmother was sitting in a large armchair. What do you want? She said to him, but she did not look so very wicked. I should like to have 3 golden hairs from the devil's head, answered he, else I cannot keep my wife. This is a good deal to ask for, said she. If the devil comes home and finds you, it will cost you your life. But as I pity you, I will see if I cannot help you. She changed him into an ant and said, Creep into the folds of my dress. You will be safe there. Yes, answered he, so far so good. But there are 3 things besides that I want to know. Why a fountain which once flowed with wine has become dry, and no longer gives even water. Why a tree which once bore golden apples does not even put forth leaves. And why a ferryman must always be going backwards and forwards, and is never set free. Those are difficult questions, answered she, but just be silent and quiet, and pay attention to what the devil says when I pull out the 3 golden hairs. As the evening came on, the devil returned home. No sooner had he entered that he had noticed that the air was not pure. I smell man's flesh, said he. All is not right here. Then he pried into every corner and searched, but could not find anything. His grandmother scolded him. It has just been swept, said she, and everything is put in order, and now you are upsetting it again. You have always got a man's flesh on your nose. Sit down and eat your supper. When he had eaten and drunk, he was tired, and laid his head in his grandmother's lap, and told her that she should louse him a little while. It was not long before he was fast asleep, snoring and breathing heavily. Then the old woman took hold of a golden hair, pulled it out, and laid it down beside her. Oh, cried the devil, what are you doing? I have had a bad dream, answered the grandmother, so I seized hold of your hair. What did you dream then? Said the devil. I dreamed that a fountain in the marketplace from which wine once flowed was dried up, and not even water would flow of it. What is the cause of it? Oh, ho, if they did but know it, answered the devil. There was a toad sitting under the stone in the well. If they killed it, the wine would flow again. The grandmother loused him again until he went to sleep, and snored so that the window shook. Then she pulled the second hair out. Ah, what are you doing? Cried the devil angrily. Do not take it ill, said she. I did it in a dream. What have you dreamt of this time? Asked he. I dreamt that in a certain kingdom there stood an apple tree, which had once borne golden apples, but now would not even bear leaves. What think you was the reason? Oh, if they did but know, answered the devil. A mouse is gnawing at the root. If they killed it, they would have golden apples again, but if it gnaws much longer, the tree will wither altogether. But I have had enough of your dreams. If you disturb me in my sleep again, you will get a box on the ear. The grandmother spoke gently to him and picked his lice once more until he fell asleep and snored. Then she took hold of the 3rd golden hair and pulled it out. The devil jumped up and roared out, and would have threatened her ill if she had not quieted him again and said, Who can help bad dreams? What was the dream then? Asked he, and was quite curious. I dreamt of a ferryman who complained that he must always ferry from one side to the other, and was never released. What is the cause of it? Ah, the fool, answered the devil. When anyone comes and wants to go across, he must put the oar in their hand, and then the other man will have to ferry and he will be free. As the grandmother had plucked out the 3 golden hairs, and the 3 questions were answered, she let the old devil alone, and he slept until daybreak. When the devil had gone out again, the old woman took the ant out of the folds of her dress, and gave the child of good fortune his human shape again. There are the 3 golden hairs for you, said she. What the devil said to your 3 questions I suppose you heard. Yes, said he, I heard, and I will take care to remember. You have what you want, said she. Now you can go on your way. He thanked the old woman for helping him in his need, and left Hell well content that everything had turned out so fortunately. When he came to the ferryman, he was expected to give the promised answer. Ferry me across first, said the child of good fortune. Then I will tell you how you can be set free. And when he reached the opposite shore, he gave him the devil's advice. Next time anyone comes who wants to be ferried over, just put the oar in his hand. He went on and came to the town wherein stood the unfruitful tree, and there too the watchman wanted an answer. So he told him what he had heard from the devil. Kill the mouse which is gnawing at its root, and then it will again bear golden apples. Then the watchman thanked him, and gave him as a reward 2 asses laden with gold, which followed him. Finally he came to a town whose well was dry. He told the watchman what the devil had said. A toad is in the well beneath a stone. You must find it and kill it, and the well will again give wine in plenty. The watchman thanked him, and also gave him 2 asses laden with gold. At last the child of good fortune got home to his wife, who was heartily glad to see him again, and to hear how well he had prospered in everything. To the king he took what he had asked for, the devil's 3 golden hairs. And when the king saw the 4 asses laden with gold, he was quite content, and said, Now all the conditions are fulfilled. You can keep my daughter. But tell me, dear son-in-law, where did all that gold come from? This is tremendous wealth. I was rowed across a river, answered he, and got it there. It lies on the shore instead of sand. Can I too fetch some of it? Said the king, and he was quite eager about it. As much as you'd like, answered he. There is a ferryman on the river. Let him ferry you over, and you can fill your sacks on the other side. The greedy king set out in all haste, and when he came to the river he beckoned to the ferryman to put him across. The ferryman came and bade him to get in, and when they got to the other shore, he put the oar in his hand and sprang over. But from this time forth the king had to ferry as a punishment for his sins. Perhaps he is ferrying still. If he is, it is because no one has taken the oar from him.